Three on the Tree. We'd lived in the house on the eastern fringe of Cody about a year. When we left the trailer court, I asked Mother if she'd let me organize the cabinets in our new house, since things were always such a mess in the trailer. The new order made me happy. We were now a single family unit after living as a double-wide tribe in side-by-side trailers since the summer of 1951. Aunt Dot and Uncle Kai had moved into a house in Cody Heights and were visiting that afternoon in October 1958. I was in the living room typing mimeograph sheets for the Church of Christ Sunday Bulletin that I would run off on the preacher's mimeograph machine next morning before church. I would let each copy dry, then fold and stack the lot, placing them in the vestibule before teaching my Sunday school class. I had been baptized by immersion required by the Church of Christ the summer before and had volunteered to be the editor of the church bulletin. The month before my baptism, we'd all gone to Red River, New Mexico for the Ezell family reunion, where Mother and Aunt Dot got to drink whiskey and play poker with all their brothers and sisters, and we kids got to have adventures with our cousins. I discovered at age 15 that the adventures were more daring than before, especially since our older male cousins had suggested nocturnal snipe hunting, which I realized was a way to lure the girls into the pines to make out. I fell in love with my cousin Norman at that reunion. We did a lot of kissing in the woods. I wanted to marry him, of course, and was heartbroken when we headed north to Cody and his family returned to Albuquerque. My sister Sherry tattled on me to Mother, probably because she was jealous. No one wanted to kiss her, causing a minor scandal on the drive home. The next Sunday at church, I went forward to show silent contrition for my sin of incest. How could I have thought it was okay to be romantic with my mother's nephew? It occurred to me as I left the pew to walk up to the front that many church members were thinking I'd done more than the kissing I knew I was guilty of, a sin I could not articulate, but merely signal by going forward. Tongues would wag, I was sure. My subsequent public baptism quelled the gossip. I hoped that teaching Sunday school and editing the church bulletin would restore my respectability among the brethren. While I typed in the living room, Mother, Daddy, Aunt Dot, and Uncle Kai were at the kitchen table discussing the future. Daddy and Uncle Kai had sold all but one of the trucks that years before they thought would make their fortune in the hauling business, and they'd turned title to the nearby ranch trailer court back to old Mrs. Ingram. They just could not keep up with the payments after 6 years of struggle. Daddy was taking tests to qualify for a civil service job wherever they were hiring. A long shot, but his only option for real employment at age 41. Aunt Dot and Uncle Kai were angling to buy the Quick Shake Inn in Littleton, Colorado, and I counted on their move to get me out of Cody. I was 15, stigmatized as trailer trash, a curse I could not shake. I decided to give up my plan to be valedictorian at Cody High, tough out my sophomore year making top grades, and escape to Colorado the following summer. I would work at the burger joint and go to Littleton High as the niece of business owners living in a real house. One summer, 3 years before, I'd been washing my hair in my aunt and uncle's trailer, bent over their bathroom sink next to the open door, looking forward to nap time and reading the next chapter in Osa Johnson's I Married Adventure, when Uncle Kai slipped his hand under the plaid blouse I'd bought at Penny's with my babysitting money, grabbed my breast and said, "You'll be a well-built-up woman someday, Punky." I'd been his favorite, among his brother's kids, the eldest of 4. He'd never offered to take off his belt to me, as he often did my younger brother, until a few years before, when Daddy stopped him during a vigorous welting and told him not to touch Ronnie again. I thought of him as another father, since we'd all lived together in the trailer court since I was 8, and they'd been a fixture in our lives since I could remember. He was known as Daddy's brother, though he was actually his nephew. Daddy's elder sister Pearl had died at age 24 from what Daddy called pellagra, though I learned later from her death certificate that she'd succumbed to pernicious vomiting of pregnancy. After Pearl died at age 24 in her 3rd pregnancy, her folks found out that her husband Otto Hillman, father to her 2 toddlers, already had another wife and family. When old Hillman showed up to take his kids to that Catholic orphanage in San Antone, why Ma Cunningham was on the front porch pointing her rifle at him. She told him to get and never come back. She was Church of Christ and was not about to let her grandchildren go to hell for being brought up by a bunch of nuns. So she and Dave took them in as their own kids, and if they were never legally adopted, they nevertheless grew up Cunninghams, the youngest of their brood of 7 on the farm near Brownwood, Texas. Daddy says his ma kept him out of 1st grade because she needed him to look after the little ones, Otto Ellsworth, then 4, and Rita Pearl, then 2, so she could help Pa keep up with all the farm chores. She was most likely sick and tired of taking care of small children. Daddy was born when Pearl was 18, and his elder sister was more a mother to him than his own ma. He once told me that Pearl's death when he was just 6 broke his heart. That's how Otto, the nephew, who was just 2 years younger, became Daddy's little brother. Otto's name invited the nickname Kaiser, which was shortened to Kai. Daddy's nickname, Nig, came from the fact that he tanned so dark each summer. When Kai and Nig grew up, they married Dot and Bee, who were sisters. From that time on, the 4 became an enmeshed unit. So I grew up with 4 parents. Daddy worked hard, pushed the hand plow to furrow the hard ground for the garden he planted every summer, and beheaded the chickens he raised for eggs and Sunday dinner. Mother took care of all the kids, did all the domestic labor, canned the crops we couldn't consume in summer, pulled pin feathers, cut up and fried the chicken. Aunt Dot went to work at Husky Oil, sewed the dresses of all 4 girls, and had sick headaches. Uncle Kai worked with Daddy, fixed cars, bragged, and barked orders. If his kids were car sick in the back seat of his car, they had to swallow it. That summer afternoon in 1955, soul sundered by my uncle's untoward touch, I numbly rinsed and towel-dried my hair and climbed onto the top bunk in the middle bedroom of their 45-foot trailer to take the afternoon nap Mother always required of every one of us 7 kids she had to look after every day. I was the eldest, age 12. Dot and Kai's David was the youngest, age 1. We had orders to get in bed and stay until she told us nap was over. That daily 2-hour respite gave her strength to cook the nightly meal for 11 people. Dot had the only regular money-making job of the 4 adults as a key punch operator at Husky Oil. The men looked for hauling jobs, but were often outbid by the established outfits in Cody. Everyone relied on Mother to keep the infrastructure functioning, including managing the trailer court, where often the power was cut for non-payment of utility bills. The Cunningham brothers, who'd worked as linemen for Bell Telephone before going into business for themselves in Cody, would just put on their climbing hooks and jigger the wires to restore electricity to the complaining trailer park tenants. Our trailers were parked side by side, and those trailers were home to everyone. We went back and forth at will, having all our meals in our 55-foot Pontiac Chief. Aunt Dot and Uncle Kai and their 3 kids slept in their trailer at night. From the time I was 11, Aunt Dot let me use her white electric sewing machine to make my own clothes in exchange for cleaning their trailer. I relished my time there while the younger kids were outside playing until the day my uncle dislodged my being. He walked through the bedroom during nap time that day, my sister Sherry on the bottom bunk, I on the top, my hair still damp, my innards a whirl. His gaze declared dominance and demanded silence. But I knew I had to tell my mother. I was undone. I ran next door to our own trailer when nap time ended 2 hours later. I spewed my confusion, rehearsed for 2 hours on the top bunk, almost as a sonorous lament. Mother, I was washing my hair before nap, and Uncle Kai reached under my blouse and grabbed my breast and told me I'd be a well-built-up woman someday. Her face went white. Her dark brown eyes snapped wide. I'd heard her and Aunt Dot talk about their sister Glad's husband, Jack, always trying to catch them alone so he could feel them up. And now Mother's own daughter had been subjected to the same violation that she and her sister had evaded. Now her own sister's husband, the brother of her girl's father, he had actually done such a thing. Stay away from him, she said grimly. I'll talk to Dot. And I wondered how I could stay away from him. We all lived together. We all ate together. We all went together wherever we went, including the Cody Church of Christ, where Uncle Kai often led prayer every Sunday at morning and night and every Wednesday night. The next day, she told me that Aunt Dot told her that Uncle Kai said, I did no such thing. She made it up. I asked Mother what Daddy thought, and she told me he said, that's none of our business. So life went on. I was confounded. I had to act as though nothing had happened, yet felt nausea in Uncle Kai's presence. All the adults acted as though nothing had happened. Never did Aunt Dot say a word to me about what had happened. I knew she knew I'd told the truth, and she must also have been confounded. Mother, I'm sure, was as devastated as I was, and I knew she wanted to protect me. But what could she do except to tell me to stay away from Uncle Kai? So that day in 1958, when I left the typewriter to walk into the kitchen for a glass of water, when Uncle Kai said, hey, Punky, how about a driving lesson today? My eyes begged Mother and Daddy for a reason not to accept his offer. Neither spoke a word. I felt forced to say, sure. I got behind the wheel of his prized 1951 cream and turquoise Cadillac, cherried out after he bought it used from the president of Husky Oil, shakily inserted the key, eased up the clutch to put it in reverse, then shifted into drive after backing out of the driveway for the lesson he had planned. No sooner had I turned the corner off the country lane our house was on than his hands were all over my torso. I protected myself by holding my elbows in as I steered, but I was vulnerable every time I had to shift gears. I drove up the Belfry Highway, then he directed me to turn onto Sunlight Road, leading to the Badlands, where he began his monologue. You remember that time I caught you under the arm back in the trailer, Punky? I didn't mean anything by that, but you do need to know what men want from girls. That's today's lesson. They want that puzzy. He pronounced it puzzy, a word I'd never heard before. You get to be a certain age, you get all built up, and that's all they see in you, that puzzy. And they want it. And they'll do whatever they have to get it. You'll see when boys start taking you out. They'll be feeling you up. I tell you this, you can't trust a one of them, even if they act all lovey-dovey. They all want one thing. They want to pop that cherry. He pushed the cigarette lighter into its receptacle, removed it to light a cool, replaced it, then took a deep drag. He exhaled his invitation. Why don't you drive over that ridge and park so I can get you all hot and bothered? By this time, his hand was sliding between my thighs, difficult to avoid as I drove. I slammed on the brakes, geared down, closed my legs, shoved his hands away from me, and said, I want to drive back, Uncle Kai. Please stop. You don't know what it's like, Punky, wanting it and not getting it, his monologue continued, as I pointed the car back to Cody. Your Aunt Dot is cold. She's always got a headache or she's sick. She gives me blue balls. And I was so gentle with her when we started out. I know how to break in a virgin. I know how to do a woman. I know the touch that warms her up. Your dad is known for that big cock, bigger than mine, biggest I ever saw. He's hung like a mule. He thinks that makes him a better man, but I know how to give a woman what she wants. It took me about a week to get into Dot after we got married. I took it slow and easy. Your dad, he just jams it into your mother to get off, and she's supposed to like it. Dot don't know how lucky she is with me, but she don't want it. I am good, and when I shoot, I can shoot 100 feet. Never had I heard such words, though I had overheard Aunt Dot complaining to Mother about how she always had to tell Uncle Kai to wash up before getting into bed, how she could not stand his reeking body and car grease hands. I endured his monologue, accelerating, braking, clutching, taking the curves with my best skill, my mind in chaos. My feeble retort as we hit Sheridan Road, a few blocks from home, was, well, I guess when it comes to men, I can only trust you and Daddy. I pulled into the driveway and slunk into the kitchen, avoiding all eyes, where Mother, Daddy, and Aunt Dot were still smoking and swigging Maxwell House. Uncle Kai said, she's getting the hang of it, ain't ya, Punky? He sat back down at the table, and I went back to my typing, once again tattered within, vowing to keep my distance from then on, never again to go alone with him in the car. But I had to get out of Cody. I did not tell Mother what happened on that drive because I knew she would not let me go to Colorado the next summer. I would just be extra wary of the man I'd always considered as much a father as Daddy. And that's the end of that chapter.